you have been tuning over to us or just hanging in with your Sports Talk local affiliate and rolling with us here as you're heading home from work, or maybe you're out for a walk, or doing a little jog, or cutting the grass, or playing a little golf, or hitting a little tennis ball, whatever you're doing. Glad you got us with you tonight, right here on Sports Talk on the Sports Talk Media Network. Phil Kornblut, Pat Daniel here in Columbia, Chris Bergen from the Berge Palace in Sardis, and our phone number 888-898-25. That's 888-898-2525. We'll take your phone calls and Chalk Talk tonight with Chuck Reedy, Ellis Johnson, and live from Rome at the Ryder Cup, MJ Ward at 7:30 Eastern Time, which is like 1:30 or so over in Italy. So MJ going beyond the call of duty to join us tonight and throughout the rest of the week. Drop the old anvil on everybody today, reporting that the possibility, the likelihood of Clemson leaving the ACC is very strong, and something could/will happen in October. And he has some quotes from some anonymous Clemson sources indicating such. Where they will go, SEC. And Gene writes, South Carolina doesn't want Clemson in the ACC. Maybe the Big Ten. The heck was that? Maybe the Big Ten. And Florida State and North Carolina would go with them, or they would go with Florida State and North Carolina, however you want to look at it, however you want to spin it. So this is happening again, and this is happening for real. And it looks like the Clemson Board of Trustees has a meeting next week. Got to believe the timing is more than just curious, that the story comes out today and the meeting is next week. And Gene has these quotes from folks up at Clemson, unidentified. So, a couple of aspects of this story. Number one, Clemson not willing to hang around the ACC, not willing to go with their deal where the more you win, the more you make. And they believe that they can get out of the grant of rights deal that has teams, well, apparently not locked down, but has teams under a contract through 36. Feeling is they can get out of that, apparently. And so, will all three migrate to the same league? Will they split up? Will it be the SEC? Will it be the Big Ten? Those apparently are the only two landing spots under consideration. And then the other side of the story here, of course, from a Clemson standpoint, is South Carolina. The Gamecocks don't want you in. And Gene cites a senior USC athletic official, unidentified, as saying as such. And if you're South Carolina, I mean, why would you? One of the few things South Carolina has in football, Clemson, in recruiting, is the lure of the SEC. If it's still a lure, which I think it is, though the ACC is obviously making some noise and holding its own, if not beating the SEC head-to-head so far this year. But that's just 1 year. The reputation, the branding, the image of the SEC football-wise dwarfs the ACC. I think we all know that. And certainly the teams thinking about leaving feel the same way. Now, does South Carolina have any pull, any power in the SEC to say no and have the SEC agree? No, they don't. You know, if Texas A&M couldn't stop Texas, South Carolina can't stop Clemson, okay? So just forget about that. But, ladies and gentlemen, as I welcome Berge and Pat to the conversation, if you ask me, Dabo Swinney is living today professionally his worst nightmare. His worst nightmare. Let me explain. personally, everything is great. You know, you're making $10 million a year, got a great family, big house, everything is great. Professionally, the record recently hasn't been good. Also, he is now living in a world that he has to hate because he has said so. He's living in a world where you have to pay players like professionals. He's living in a world where you don't have to recruit the transfer portal, John, to survive, but it's a big help, and a lot of people are doing it, and a lot of people are succeeding with it, and a lot of people are extending their lives in coaching by doing so. And now, throw on top of that, he's going to be forced to move out of his Beverly Hills football neighborhood and possibly go into South Chicago. And
wow,
it's his worst. He's living his worst professional nightmare. This is everything he doesn't want. If I were to, if my brain was his brain, which is something he definitely wouldn't want. But this is everything that he hates, I think, about college sports. Because paying players, recruiting out of the portal, John, and leaving the ACC where he's had the upper hand for all these years and is still right there. I think this is a bump in the road year for him. Be right back next year with a more veteran quarterback, more pieces, more players, etc. You know the deal. So I think this is nightmare time for him, and this is pretty much against everything that he has stood for and talked about and argued against. He's now going to have to live with if he stays in college coaching. And Bergie, welcome in.
Hello, sir. The South Chicago reference is kind of interesting. I get your biggest bullies on the block type scenario, but the SEC is Beverly Hills money, though, right? So we've got to find some kind of common ground in there, more so than the ACC. If it weren't, they wouldn't be trying to leave the penthouse to go in and hang out with the biggest, baddest bullies on the block. But I think you're right. It makes zero sense from just a football perspective only for Clemson to leave the Atlantic Coast Conference. This year being a blip on the radar because as we sifted through it took a while. This is the first time Clemson's been 0-2 in ACC play since 2010. What was that, Dabo's second full year as head coach of the Tigers? It has been a long, long time since they've gone down this road. They have dominated that league for the better part of a decade plus. They're not going to be able to do that in the SEC. They recruit just as well as an SEC team. They just don't have to deal with the gauntlet that they'll have to, and it looks like the teams that they are competing with in the ACC are going to be going with them to some league, whether it be the Big Ten or the SEC. So it's not as if they're they're bringing the best of the ACC with them. Add to having to face Georgia and Alabama and LSU and Texas and Oklahoma and South Carolina, who you'll have to play every year, and Florida and Tennessee. It's going to be ridiculous the amount of difficulty it will be for Clemson and South Carolina and Georgia and Florida and everybody else to get back to where the Tigers have been, sitting atop that perch for a decade now.
Yeah. It's not an easy road to hoe, to say the least. And I'm looking at Gene's story now, and just to pull out a few excerpts from it, he asked the question, he says here, of a Clemson senior administrator last week, asked about a timetable for Clemson to move out of the ACC. How soon? Sooner than later. Sometime in 2023. Stay very tuned, the administrator said. The administrator and administrators to Gene indicated an announcement about Clemson bolting from the ACC and the growing financial disadvantage between the ACC and the SEC and the Big Ten. It's coming soon, probably along with Florida State and North Carolina and perhaps another ACC school or more. And he writes, this is happening even as USC tries to block Clemson from the SEC. And going on a little deeper here into his story, the school administrator at South Carolina, who he cited, unnamed, he quoted as saying, our fan base and coaches do not want Clemson in a league that gives us a great recruiting advantage. We respect what our fans want, and we will play Clemson in all sports anyway. End of the quote. So,
This is payback, though, from the 70s, isn't it?
Well, I mean, if you want to...
When South Carolina left the ACC and they thought they had Clemson going with them and what Maryland as well, and Clemson backed out at the last moment. I mean, it's taken a long time, but maybe the Gamecocks, at least long-time Gamecock personnel, are saying, all right, payback, so you know what.
Yeah.
And here we go. But I agree with you. If Texas A&M was unable to block Texas, I can't imagine the Gamecocks would be successful in this. But I think this has a lot to do with what happened back in the early 70s.
I got to believe the other school he's alluding to that wasn't named got to be Miami, wouldn't you think? Wouldn't you think Miami, Florida State, Clemson, and North Carolina would all be connected? Gene Rice.
North Carolina Duke supposed to be connected at the hip? What's happened to that?
Well, you would think NC State and North Carolina were connected, but NC State was the one that cast the ultimate vote in the last expansion vote. The Big Ten remains an option, the Clemson administrator said. Scheduling would be alleviated by other ACC schools joining and a renewed rivalry with Maryland. Okay, so here you go on that situation. It's bubbling up, boiling over now, and I guess next week could be the key week because there's a Board of Trustees meeting at Clemson where apparently this issue is going to be I would imagine, item number one on the agenda. An agenda has not been made public yet, but I would think that this would be item number one on the agenda. So there you go with that. We'll see where Clemson lands and what happens moving forward. Interesting times there for the Tigers, both on and off the field. We'll talk more about that. And also, of course, South Carolina's getting ready for Tennessee. They'll be facing a Tennessee team, interesting, with a quarterback with what's stronger than a cannon? What's
bazooka
howitzer? Yeah. That for an arm, but they like to run the ball. Mm-hmm. Their running game has been much more productive to this point than their throwing game, which makes them a double deadly weapon on offense. Plus, Milton can also run. He broke off an 81-yarder last week. So here are the Gamecocks going to Tennessee, knowing that Tennessee hasn't forgotten what happened last year. And if they could go, they need to steal a victory somewhere to get back on track for the Phenom season, something more than just the above-average season. They need to steal one. Can this be stolen? Is this a stealable game for the Gamecocks?
Well, sure it is. If they play the way they did a season ago against these guys, absolutely is. I think, though, the key is going to be, can they slow down Tennessee's offense, because that is as balanced of an attack as they're probably going to see all season. They rush it for about 200-plus yards. They throw it for about 200-plus yards. And right now they're doing a tremendous job on offense. And defensively, they have been getting after the quarterback, and the offensive line, which has steadily improved. It had nowhere to go but up after the North Carolina game. It has steadily improved the last couple of weeks. It will have to by far play its best game to not only establish the run, but also keep Spencer Rattler upright enough to allow that offense to continue to move the football the way it has done through the first month of the season. It's a tremendous challenge, but so was going into last year was going to be a tremendous challenge, I think, against a better throwing Tennessee team. This one appears to be a little bit more balanced, though, than last year's offense from them.
Yeah, I agree. I think one difference is South Carolina, when they played Tennessee last year, Tennessee was rolling, and South Carolina was coming off a dreadful performance at Florida, where they had, 90 yards or something, some abysmal amount of yardage. And, nobody thought South Carolina would hang with Tennessee last year. And when the Gamecocks scored on the opening drive and then stopped Tennessee, or maybe Tennessee answered, but then the Gamecocks scored again, and they scored again. It's like, where was this team last week? Is this the same team that was on the field? Because I was in Gainesville for that game, and this is not the same team that we watched last week. And so the point is, South Carolina's coming off a very strong offensive performance against Mississippi State, and their quarterback, Spencer Rattler, is among the nation's best passers right now. And Tennessee is not going to be, not that they walked into Williams-Brice last year all cocky and felt like all they had to do was show up.
I think there may have been some of that, though.
Well,
I mean, it's human nature, right? They watched the film of Carolina and Florida and thought, there's no way these guys can stay on the field with us.
Well, this time they're going to have South Carolina's going to have Tennessee's full attention, right?
No, there's no question. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So South Carolina will have to play some excellent football, Pat.
Wasn't there a good bit of back and forth between Colombian native Jalen Hyatt and Cam Smith and some of the players? I feel like there was a lot of build-up before that game last season where I think some of the Gamecock players, if I remember right, took exception to some of the things Hyatt and some other Tennessee wide receivers said, where they were even talking about potentially running up the score, weren't they?
Yeah, you're exactly right. How much of an underdog was South Carolina?
Carolina did, yeah.
and how much of an underdog were the Gamecocks going into that game last year? They were 22.5-point underdogs at home.
Ooh, easy money.
That's how much people weren't thinking that South Carolina could hang with Tennessee. And now the Gamecocks are 11.5-point underdogs. And like I said last night, and I'll say it again tonight, I'm taking the points because I think South Carolina can score. I think they can score pretty much on anybody. Now, they scored early against Georgia, and then Georgia kind of took them out of it in the second half. But they proved they could move the ball and score on Georgia in the first 30 minutes. Couldn't sustain it. I think they can score on pretty much anybody, especially with Rattler being in his zone, Leggett doing what he does. Now maybe a little bit of a punch in the running game. And I think what they'll do, I would look for their first series, probably show a little running game, and then try and see if Rattler and Leggett can hook up for something deep off of play action. What do you think? Maybe you run the ball on first down, depending on your field position, run the ball first down, and then come back with a little play action on second or third down and see if you can get Leggett open behind their secondary at Tennessee and score big, score early, and kind of take the crowd out of it.
I think it's important for them. They've got to do sort of what they did this past week against Mississippi State, and also what they did, similar game plan at Georgia, jump on them early. You need to be out and running first. You don't want to fall behind these guys because they can lap the field on you if you get too far behind them. So you've got to stay within arm's length of Tennessee until you get in the fourth quarter and go try and win it. So I think you're right. I think I try and be aggressive, which is what Shane Beamer said. That's how they attacked last year's game. They were in attack mode the entire time. Stay that way. Nobody expected you to win that game last year. I would imagine the majority of folks don't expect you to go to Neyland Stadium and win this year. So a similar game plan and go attack. You've got to be able to take that offense, which has looked really, really good so far this season, and continue to develop and score.
All right, our phone number, 888-898-2525. We'll get your calls in a moment. You need to make a phone call to Jimmy Smith at James Smith Real Estate down in Pawleys Island to get yourself set up for next summer, or maybe you want to get away sometime this fall. Jimmy's number is 843-237-4246. The only call you need to make for that perfect beach getaway. Be right back.
Dumpster Plus is your solution to a more cost-effective and professional work site. Dumpster Plus provides a roll-off dumpster and porta-john in one. Give them a call at 803-500-5094 and ask them about two services for the price of one. It's one call, one delivery, two services. Locally owned and operated in Columbia, and that means you'll talk to a real live local person, ready to get what you need with a 24-hour turnaround guaranteed. Whether your worksite is residential or commercial, big or small, near or far, you'll save money with Dumpster Plus. Waste management solutions never look so good. Call Dumpster Plus at 803-500-5094. That's 803-500-5094 for Dumpster Plus.
I'm State Treasurer Curtis Loftus. People often ask me, when should I start saving for college? And I always tell them, start today. September is College Savings Month, a great time to start saving for your child's education. Future Scholar makes it easy to open and manage your account online, and the plan offers options and benefits you won't find with a regular savings or investment account. So make this the month that you go to FutureScholar.com and see why it's the smart, easy way to save for college. FutureScholar.com.
We're with Major Billy Downer of the Department of Natural Resources. Major Downer, let's say I'm out in the woods or I'm on the water and I need to reach a DNR agent. How do I do that?
Operation Game Thief, Phil. It's been around 30 plus years. You can call us at our 24-hour hotline anytime. 922-5431. To report wildlife violations or to get help if you're in trouble in the woods or on the water, call us at Operation Game Thief, 1-800-922-5431.
Hi, it's Phil Kornblut of the Sports Talk Media Network. We love our high school football in South Carolina, and we love bringing you the scores every Friday night. From 10 to midnight, we check in on every region across the state with live reports and coaches' interviews. So whether you're in your car after a game or lounging in your den, be sure to dial up the Founders Federal High School scoreboard Friday nights right here on the Sports Talk Media Network.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Talk Media Network. Let's turn it over to your phone calls. 888-898-2525. Robbie and Florence, welcome into Sports Talk tonight. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, Phil. Thank you for taking my call. I'm a long game fan, always have been. And I was just wondering who handles or how are the logistics handled as far as the flights go and accommodations, meals, transportation, so on and so forth, because it's just something I was worried about and maybe or not wondering about, maybe something simple. But anyway, I'm going to hang up and listen.
All right. Accommodations and flights, is he talking about like for the teams?
That's what I gathered.
Yeah.
And, you know, in my experience with Coastal, the teams handle all of that stuff. They've got a director of football operations, basketball operations, whatever, and that's pretty much their job is to handle hotels, travel, the whole 9 yards. So the schools pretty much handle that. Now, once it gets into the playoffs or the NCAA basketball tournament, I think the NCAA handles that. But for the tournament anyway, I don't know about the college football playoff because the NCAA has no control over that. So maybe the schools handle that as well. I'm not sure. But that's normally how travel is handled within schools.
Yeah, there's somebody within their organization that takes care of it. In fact, it's planned like years in advance. When you know you're going to a location, the person who handles that travels out there in advance, finds the hotel, and has to be a hotel with enough conference space to handle meetings and even some practicing inside those ballrooms. You know, you'll see the teams in there doing that sometime. Yeah.
Football is an amazing organization to watch travel because of the amount of stuff, the equipment trucks we all know about, the amount of equipment they take, and then the hotels, you're right, they've got to have ballroom space to be able to feed. You're talking about 100 people roughly that you've got to be able to feed. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, plus snacks and everything else. Basketball, a lot easier. A whole lot easier. You're dealing with 25 in your travel party versus 200 in your travel party.
Yeah, exactly. All right, thanks for the phone call, and we will continue with more calls coming up after the break here on Sports Talk, 888-898-2525. Bryce Young was back in practice today for the Panthers, so that is good news for them. And Clemson got its ACC basketball schedule. Will it be their last?
So ridiculous.
Their ACC basketball schedule last night, which begins on December 3rd at Pittsburgh and then January 3rd at Miami. Their first two league games will be on the road.
And a month apart. College football doesn't have that long between conference games.
Well,
what are you doing?
They want to give you a little teaser in December, I guess. Be right back after the break.
On Point Weather is made possible by our friends at Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union on 107 The Point.
Here's tonight's forecast. Cloudy tonight with a low dipping to 61. Tomorrow will be much like today. 79 the high with mostly cloudy skies and a 20% chance of afternoon rain. For Friday, it's a mix of sun and clouds. No rain and a high of 82. The weekend looks nice with a combo of sun and clouds and highs in the low 80s. I'm Brian Leonard with your On Point local weather. Ever wonder why more businesses don't provide the same excellent service as, say, Chick-fil-A? At Hometown 803, they do. They're your family-run, all things South Carolina store, famous for their 803 area code hats with the crescent moon. They also have Carolina and Clemson-themed hats and their latest drop, PVC patch hats, which are just on fire. Their local high school partner hats are the hats that give back with each sale. Visit their store in downtown Lexington next to McDonald's or online at hometown803.com. Use code RADIO at checkout to get 15% off.
With SRN News, I'm Keith Peters reporting Florida Governor Ron DeSantis will be center stage again when candidates meet for the second Republican presidential debate. The candidate placement on stage is based on candidate order in polls that meet standards set by the Republican National Committee, with higher performing candidates closer to center stage. South Carolina Senator Tim Scott had asked the RNC to change its rules so he would be closer to center than the last debate, but they didn't budge. U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan says she won't recuse herself from Donald Trump's 2020 election interference case in Washington. Chutkan rejects the Republican ex-president's claims. Her past comments raised doubts about whether she can be fair. Chutkan said in her written decision Wednesday she sees no reason to step aside in the case scheduled for trial in March. More details at srnnews.com.
Shooter's Choice is calling all the hunters. It's that time. The hunt is on. September means new hunting seasons are coming. Look, there's no better place to start your hunt than at Shooter's Choice. Let them get you ready for your favorite time of year. The weather's changing. There's no better feeling than knowing your rifle has been zeroed in and you are ready. Shooter's Choice is your hunting suppressor headquarters. September also brings you sale prices on ammo, firearms, and scopes because, as I've said, the hunt is on. Choose that Benelli shotgun that you've been dreaming about or the Bergara rifles. Hey, it's the perfect time to think about a Champion safe to secure all your valuables while you're away. All safes are on sale this month. Check out your FN and Staccato Firearms Factory Days in late September. These are factory promotions with prices too low to list. So if it's hunting or personal protection, Shooter's Choice has a plan for you. In West Columbia on Sunset Boulevard, or if you can't make it in, go online at shooterschoicesc.com. It can't get much easier than that. September's here. The hunt is on. So make it your first choice, your best choice. Make it Shooter's Choice.
Dave Ramsey here. Do you want your money to work for you rather than you working for your money? Go see my friends at Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union. They're not a mega bank and have been serving the Midlands since 1936, offering good old-fashioned customer service and free services. They'll look out for your financial well-being. With 14 locations, check them out today at palmettocitizens.org. Federally insured by the NCUA.
September means football and fall temps rolling in, but when it comes to our favorite fur babies, the shelters are still full from summer and those dogs and cats need you more than ever. While the leaves are changing colors, these pets are sitting in the shelter looking for a new family. Be a hero to your kids. Be a hero to these puppies and kitty cats. Visit petfinder.com to take a look at all the great dogs and cats available to you. That's petfinder.com.
I sure like to brag about good local businesses. Franklin Plumbing and Drain Cleaning is a great local business. Josh and his team stress customer service as their top priority. Franklin Plumbing and Drain Cleaning came out to my house. I had a toilet that wasn't working right, a garbage disposal that died. They came out right on time, told me everything they were going to do, and explained the price of each repair before even bringing in the tools. I knew exactly what I was getting and exactly what it would cost. Their prices are fair. Their team is courteous and professional. Plus, they did a great job fixing what needed fixing in my home. I am very careful about making any recommendations, and I'm thrilled and confident to suggest you call Franklin Plumbing and Drain Cleaning for any plumbing needs. If it's a repair or to replace something, if it's that tankless water heater that you've always wanted to give you that endless hot water and save you some money, they unclog drain and sewer lines and so much more. Online, you'll find them at franklinplumbing.sc.com or just give Josh and those great folks a phone call, 799-2222. That's 799-2222, and tell them you heard about them from here at The Point.
Now, we're talking about that Clemson basketball schedule in the ACC as we're going into the break. So the Tigers will play an early ACC game December 3rd. They've done that for a few years just to give you a little taste of ACC basketball in December. And if I'm not mistaken, December 3rd, Is that not the same day as the ACC football championship game?
Yep.
Yeah,
Usually is. Yep.
also. And you're right. They don't play another league game until January 3rd. But more important to me is they're opening up on the road, and then their third game is against North Carolina. So Brad Brownell's like, thank you so much for the easy, opening to my season. 2 road games, and then North Carolina. They get Virginia Tech on the road. So 3 of their first 4 on the road. Then they come back mid-January with Boston College and Georgia Tech. Then they go to Florida State and Duke. They close out January home to Louisville, then open February on the 3rd with Virginia. Then go to North Carolina and Syracuse. Then Miami at home. That's 3, make that 4 tough ones in a row. Virginia, North Carolina, Syracuse, and Miami. And then NC State at home, Feb 17. Then to Georgia Tech. Back home for Florida State and Pitt. Close it out at Notre Dame, and then at home with Syracuse.
Let me back up. That December 3rd is actually a Sunday, so it's the day after the ACC title game.
That's even better, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
All right, phone number 888-898-2525. Let's go to Hank in Columbia with us next. Hank, good evening. Welcome in.
Hey, how's it going, Corn?
We are terrific. You, sir?
And Chris and Pat. Still, I tell you, I could see like what Chris is saying, that the offensive line has to play well because Tennessee's always kind of been kind of a manner of an aggressive defensive line. But I was listening to one of their beat writers was on one of the shows earlier today talking, and they say it's a little bit. They have a little bit more concern about this game than they've had in years past. I think the biggest thing for Carolina is to not get caught up in the early emotion of the game, because Tennessee normally, if Carolina gets up there and Tennessee gets like a couple of quick scores to get the crowd behind them, then it gets crazy. But their concern has been that the offense has not been as spectacular as it's been in before. They said the beat writer was saying they played basically 2 or 3 teams that are kind of your give-me games, and the offense has kind of struggled until later in the game where the team got worn out and pull away. And their concern is that in the Florida game, the offense looked so inept because Florida was just
Hank, you got a bad cell there, my brother. Your cell has dumped out on you.
Oh, sorry about that.
Oh, there you go. That's better. Go ahead.
Yeah, and he said it's not been a bomb. So Florida just kept everything in front of them and make the throws. I remember watching that game, and he could not make a 15-yard pass or a 20-yard pass or crossing route. He either was throwing interceptions or he was throwing it at the feet of the people. So I think
this is
their concern is
you were breaking up. Who was this you're talking about?
They're talking about Milton.
Well, he's only thrown 1 interception. He's got an 8-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, 62%.
That was against Florida.
Yeah, 62%.
Yeah, one against Florida. Mm-hmm. But if you look at his over his mid range, their concern has been his accuracy,
mm-hmm.
and that the offense is not humming like it was under Hooker, and therefore their concern is if you look at the other games, you tell them their best win, and they were like, their best win is not really a win that the team would brag on. So
yeah.
I think it's going to be interesting. So we'll see what happens.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's kind of like Clemson and Syracuse. Syracuse has got these eye-popping numbers, but they haven't played anybody. And so you don't really know what you got if you're Clemson taking on Syracuse. I mean, you can look at the numbers. You know that Garrett Schrader is going to try and run the football a lot, but their opposition has been, painfully weak. But back to Tennessee and South Carolina and what Hank is saying, I mean, that was the thing on Milton. He's got a tremendously strong arm, and he can stay there at his 10-yard line and throw it over your head, and you're back at your own 30. And he can throw it over your head and hit somebody deep. It is those intermediate and short passes where I guess he's had some issues, though. Let me just go back here for a second and refresh myself on last year's Orange Bowl, because remember, he had to step in and be the quarterback in the Orange Bowl for
while you
Tennessee
do that,
against Clemson. Yeah.
Follow up on one of Hank's points. We were talking about the defensive front for Tennessee. They've got 16 sacks so far this season. but 15 of those came against teams not named Florida. So, I mean, go up against an SEC line, as Hank was pointing out, maybe they're not as talented up front as they have been in the past. South Carolina will certainly find that out this weekend.
He was 19 of 28 for 251 yards and 3 touchdowns in the Orange Bowl against Clemson. Clemson did sack him 4 times. So, he can run, but I don't think he's a guy that really likes to run. He had a net of 5 yards against the Tigers. He carried the ball 11 times. So, I don't think running is something he prefers to do. I think he prefers hanging in the pocket and then trying to connect with one of those receivers. And they have other running backs, of course, who they like to give the ball to, and they run the ball well. I think this is going to be, unless they change things up. See, we thought Mississippi State was going to come in and try and run the the give the ball to the SEC's leading rusher, and they didn't do that at all. They threw it for 487 yards. Now, will Tennessee, knowing that South Carolina's secondary right now is scarred? I mean, they were really burned last week by Mississippi State. Will Rogers had, against the Gamecocks last week, had 6 completions of 19 yards or 29 yards. He had 6 completions of 29 yards or longer against the Gamecocks, including, the 65-yarder and a 60-yarder. So the safeties back there, and they get a lot of blame. Sometimes it's not their fault. Sometimes they get caught in a picture because they're coming over to try to clean up somebody else's mess, and a guy catches a ball over him, and you say, look at the safety. He's not doing his job. No, he just happened to be there at the wrong time trying to help out a teammate. But across the board back there, and Clayton White kind of addressed this today some, they know they've got to be better in their secondary. They got to play better. Can't let these guys get behind them and throw balls over the top of their head.
Yeah, you're right. And there was one scenario, I think it may have been one of the long touchdown passes they had, where Nicky Manwari was actually trying to talk to one of his teammates and didn't get his head turned back around in time for the snap, and he got beat off the line there. So, I mean, communication's still a work in progress, I think, back there defensively for the Gamecocks. But the one bright spot, even with the secondary struggles, that defensive front for USC probably played its best game against the Bulldogs and actually got some pressure, and it's something they're going to have to do for sure this weekend against Tennessee.
I don't think there's any doubt the Gamecock defensive front has gotten better. TJ Sanders is playing at a very high level.
Really good.
Playing at a very high level. Tonka Hemingway continues to be pretty steady. Alex Huntley maybe had his best game as a Gamecock the other day. So they're getting better up front on both sides of the line, and those are good signs for South Carolina. Can they protect Rattler? As you mentioned, Tennessee has a terrific pass rush, one of the best pass rushes in the country thus far. Can they protect Rattler and give him the time to let some routes develop and player and receivers get open? Unfortunately, they won't have Juice Wells again. I tell you what, if the Gamecocks had a healthy Juice Wells to go with this offense right now, think about how good they really could be. Despite everything, they're only averaging about, 26 points a game? So it's not like they're lighting up the scoreboard. They still have got to take it to that next level scoring-wise. 37 points against Mississippi State was a good sign, but you got to kind of do that game in and game out. You can't have a 27 here and a 10 here, So if they go out against Tennessee, not suggesting they put 56 on the board like they did last time, but they put something in the neighborhood of 35 or 40 on the board with their offense, I would say that Dowell Loggins deserves to be the Broyles assistant coach of the year, right? To get that offense scoring those kind of numbers.
No doubt, especially considering the struggles they've had up front, virtually no running game to speak of until this past week. So, yeah, I'd be curious to get Chuck Reedy's take on what they've been able to accomplish because, he's been very, very critical of USC's lack of a run game and didn't think they could survive. And I guess, at 2-2, it's not as if they've been, undefeated so far. So he's not that far off. But I'll be fascinated to find out if he thinks Saturday was a blip on the radar, or that's progress with them and Mario Anderson starting to develop a running game and quickly turning the focus real fast, Phil, to Clemson. Dabo Swinney meeting with the media after practice today. I'll be fascinated to see if he's asked about the news that Gene Zapikoff broke today, but did update some injuries. Nate Wiggins still day to day and says he's still not quite sure, Sweeney is, if he's playing at Syracuse. Meantime, Antonio Williams dealing with an ankle injury, living in the training room, making progress. He's still questionable, though, for Saturday as well.
Yeah, good point about if he's going to talk about that, if somebody brings it up to him. And, Pat, you had something to add about Clemson from this news about the potential conference change?
Yeah, I was just going back to what you said during your opening monologue when talking about if Clemson were to, and for those of our listeners that are just tuning in, he talked a little bit, and correct me if I'm wrong here, about if Clemson were to leave and join either the Big Ten or the SEC, that would go against, in your opinion, everything that Dabo Swinney says he stands for, having to pay players, having to, what else was it you said exactly?
Recruit the portal, John.
That's right. So he would have to start doing that. Well, my question back for you then is, so we all agree that football drives the train in collegiate athletics. That is what keeps everything going. That is the moneymaker. It's the cash cow. And then basketball, then maybe baseball, and downward and downward and downward. Mm-hmm. Well, with that being said, with the success that Clemson and Dabo Swinney have had over the last decade or so, are we really to believe that Dabo Swinney is not the one making that decision? And if not, do we think that is athletic director Graham Neff or President James Clements or the board? I just have a really hard time believing that. Look at the construction that's going on around Clemson. I mean, you noted how much easier it is to get in and out on football on game days now with traffic. I've been up there twice this season looking at the new Tiger Walk, even though they had to remove a number of very high dollar parking spots from tailgating out there behind the West Zone. Look at the West End Zone and all, et cetera, et cetera. Where I'm going with this is just I have a very hard time believing that Dabo Swinney would not be the one ultimately pulling the trigger on whether Clemson leaves the ACC or stays in it.
I don't know that he has that. I mean, he's the football coach. He has bosses. He has an AD and he has a president. I don't think that. I mean, they can certainly consult and maybe get his opinion, but I'd be surprised if they left a decision to the football coach, who's not the AD and not involved in the meetings. That would surprise me if it was his decision and the AD and the president went along with it. And why would, if you're Dabo Swinney, guys, why would you want to leave the ACC? Money aside, I mean, talking about, as Pat pointed out, they've got everything that they could possibly want,
right.
And they've got plenty of money. They want more money. I'm trying to understand how Clemson is at a financial disadvantage. Everybody keeps talking about the SEC schools are making this and the ACC schools are making that. Okay, I know enough math to know that 50 is more than 30. Okay, I understand that. But in reality, with what Clemson raises through its IPs and everything, I don't see where they're starving. I don't see where they're missing anything that anybody else has. And I don't see where it's put them at a competitive disadvantage over all these years. And you might say, well, it will over the next 5 or 10 or 15 years. Oh, really? I don't know that for a fact. So you're giving up, if you make the move for that reason, then you're giving up, if I'm Dabo Swinney, you're giving up a situation where I can pretty easily get into a 12-team playoff where I'm at now, even with a mark or two on my record, because I can still win my league. But we all know SEC or Big Ten is going to be an entirely different animal from a competitive standpoint. So if you're a coach, I know you love competition, and you say that publicly, and you'll take on all comers, but back in those little boardrooms where they meet quietly in the middle of the night when nobody sees them, you know they like the idea of playing a regular diet of Duke and Wake Forest and eventually Virginia and Georgia Tech versus a regular diet of Alabama, Florida, Auburn, Tennessee, LSU, and South Carolina, and throw in Florida State, whoever else you want to throw in the mix. It's a different animal. So I'm just thinking, if I'm Dabo Swinney, that's what I'm thinking. But maybe I don't think like he does.
And I get that point. But I think Pat may have hit on something as well. Let's take it into our sort of realm here. If we're a national conglomerate, Sports Talk Media Network actually stretched from coast to coast, and we had Smitty was an outstanding salesperson here in South Carolina. but we wanted to expand into the markets in California, having no idea how well he would do in California. But we're going to take Smitty and send him to California, but we're not going to let him know. We've made that decision on our own, and then we'll let Smitty know, hey, by the way, you're not going to be selling here in South Carolina anymore. We're sending you to California to mine for new clients. I think that's sort of it's maybe a far stretched analogy, but I think Dabo had to have some sort of input. It'd be crazy to think that Clemson would make a decision without at least getting his approval.
Agreed. And that's where I was going with that, Chris, and you hit the nail on the head. Is just I have a hard time believing somebody that you've invested north of $100 million in as a coach, not to mention the however many hundreds of millions of dollars you've invested into stadium improvements, the practice facility, the Tiger Walk, just the seemingly bottomless pockets that Clemson has been able to reach into through donations, through payouts from being competitive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I just have a really hard time believing if we're in agreement that the football program is the cash cow and Dabo Swinney is the one leading that pack. I just have a really hard time believing if he does not want to leave that they would ultimately go against that decision and leave. I just have a really hard time believing that, but I fully acknowledge I could be wrong. I just struggle with that a bit.
Well, I don't think he has a vote, to be honest with you. I think the decision would come down from the president and through the board of trustees. Again, there might be some consultation, but, I mean, do you think Lincoln Riley had a vote with Southern Cal?
That's a great point, too.
Do you think any of these football coaches, they might have had some consultation and an opinion, but I don't think they had a vote in it at the end of the day.
Well, Riley had only been there for, a year?
And the funny part is, too, if let's assume for a moment they actually stayed with the grant of rights with the Atlantic Coast Conference, which I find so fascinating now because everybody wanted it at the time. They signed it. It was a wonderful deal, and now everybody wants out of it. Let's assume they stayed through it. Dabo's probably not the head coach when that grant of rights ends anyway. So to your point, Phil, I mean, this is not a 5 or 6 year move. This is something I think that you would think administrators are looking at as a 20, 25, 30-year decision, depending on how things play out. But the problem is, do we know anything about college athletics that could stand the test of time anymore? Are we looking at saying the Big Ten is going to have 20 teams from now until the 2040 season? The SEC is going to be up to 18 or 20 teams until 2050. I mean, you can't think that far ahead. So that's why I think Dabo probably does have maybe a little more input than he probably should have, because this is a more short-term decision rather than long-term.
All right, got to hit a break here on Sports Talk. We'll come back with more in just a moment. Phone number 888-898-2525, South Carolina Education Lottery lucky number to reach us here on Sports Talk on this busy Wednesday night. After the top of the hour break, it will be Chalk Talk with Coach Chuck Reedy and Coach Ellis Johnson. And I'm sure they'll have something to say about this apparently happening story with Clemson getting out of the ACC.
South Carolina's taste buds have spoken, and they're asking for beef. There are more than 7,800 farms raising cattle from pasture to plate in the Palmetto State. So whether it's steaks on the grill before the big game, sirloin medallions plated for date night, or burgers with the family, make sure beef is a part of your playbook this football season. Smoked, grilled, and slow roasted. Find the best way to enjoy your beef at scattle.org. Beef, it's what's for dinner in South Carolina. Funded by the South Carolina Beef Council, part of the Beef Checkoff program.
Looking to turn your dream home into reality? Look no further than Founders Federal Credit Union for all your mortgage loan needs. Our mortgage loans are designed with you in mind. Whether you're a first-time homebuyer or upgrading your space, we understand that where you live is more than just four walls. It's where life unfolds, where your story is written. It's a home. Let Founders help write that story with many loan options to fit your lifestyle and your budget, such as low, fixed, and adjustable rates and flexible terms. Plus, Plus, Founders never charges private mortgage insurance, PMI, on any of our mortgage products. Our mortgage loan officers are here to answer any questions you might have and help you as you begin the home buying process. Stop by one of our 41 convenient office locations or visit foundersfcu.com to apply for a mortgage today. Relax, you're with Founders, federally insured by NCUA, membership qualification required, terms and conditions apply, equal housing lender.
This year's Carolina and Clemson Jackpot $5 scratch-off tickets give you a chance to win up to $200,000, whether you're a Gamecock or a Tiger. It's Palmetto Series time, so show your school spirit, feel that team pride, and get your tickets for a chance to win up to $200,000. Yeah, baby! As you know, in this state, winning the Palmetto Series does matter that much. See SCEducationLottery.com for odds and details.
Farm Bureau Insurance's agricultural roots and ties to South Carolina farmers have shaped the company's culture and work ethic, providing a unique customer experience. Customers are treated like people, not policies. Now, while other insurance companies may have a one-size-fits-all approach to handling customers, we believe you need to be valued and treated right. Our claims professionals work until the job is done, and our agents still believe in the commitment that comes with a handshake. Call Buddy Bridges in Clinton and Lawrence at 864-923-2174 for all of your auto, home, and life insurance needs.
Yeah, you know what it is. Black and yellow, black and yellow, black and yellow, black and yellow. Yeah, you know what it is. Black and yellow, black and yellow, black and yellow, black and yellow. Yeah, you know what it is. I think I do, yeah, I do.
All right, after the top of the hour break, Chuck Reedy and Ellis Johnson will be joining us. Looking forward to chopping it up with those two. A few other notes. Texas A&M quarterback Connor missed the remainder of the season after suffering a foot injury. So new quarterback coming in there at Texas A&M. And looks like the replacement is going to be the Johnson kid out there. Is it
Max Johnson?
Is it Max Johnson? It is Johnson. Something Johnson.
Yeah, it's Max.
It is Max. Okay. Looks like he'll be the guy moving forward. Of course, South Carolina will be playing them down the road. Clemson corner Sheridan Jones, USC punter Kai Kroger, and Benedict defensive end Lubert Danilius were named semifinalists for the William V. Campbell Trophy. There are 201 semifinalists. 34th year of the trophy. The trophy recognizes an individual, they say, as the absolute best football scholar athlete in the nation for his combined academic success, football performance, and exemplary leadership. NCAA stats this week, just updating these. South Carolina, 53 total offense, 69 scoring, 121 total defense. They got to pick it up there. 81 on scoring defense. Clemson, 21 and 33 on the offense, 8 and 56. That's kind of weird, isn't it, to be 8th overall defense, but you're 56th in scoring? That's those points off turnovers.
Those turnovers, yeah. Exactly. And like Dabo said yesterday at his press conference, they've got a 4-0 undefeated defense. They're just not getting rewarded for it, and those stats sort of back that up.
Coastal is 54th offense, 55th scoring, 87th on defense, but 44th in scoring. So they're giving up some yards, but they're keeping the points down.
Mm-hmm. They got to find a way, and Tim Beck touched on it today. They've got to find a way to improve their productivity, though, inside the red zone until they do so and start running the football. I think those two things are part and parcel to the situation for them. They've had a hard time scoring touchdowns in the red zone against anybody but Duquesne. Mm-hmm. So they're going to need to fix that as they go into a pretty difficult stretch here the next couple of weeks.
And sad story today. Remember outstanding Citadel quarterback Stanley Myers, who was an attorney in West Columbia. This reported by Fitz News and then retweeted by Jeff Hartzell, the Post and Courier. He passed away unexpectedly, I think, this morning. Remember him, terrific quarterback, member of the Citadel Board of Visitors. So he passed away today. Hit a break here on Sports Talk. Be back after the top of the hour.
By the way, before we do what's supposed to happen here, thank you for pushing the button. I thank you. Programming thanks you. America thanks you.
WQXL Columbia, W264DF.
From the Bart Fireside Studio, the solution for keeping you warm this winter.
This is 107 The Point.
News this hour from townhall.com. I'm Keith Peters reporting. The second Republican presidential debate is just a few hours away. We get a preview from White House correspondent Greg Clugston.
The stage is set here at the Reagan Presidential Library northwest of Los Angeles. 7 candidates will face off, but the front-runner of the GOP field is not here. Donald Trump is in Michigan this evening to speak to current and retired auto workers in the midst of a 2-week-old union strike. The White House contenders who are here hope to use Trump's absence to break out of the pack by presenting themselves as viable alternatives to the former president. Greg Clugston at the GOP debate in Simi Valley, California.
House Republicans continue to demand that the Biden administration close the southern border as part of the bill to prevent a government shutdown. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise of Louisiana stressed that a stopgap funding measure that supports President Biden's open border policies would be unacceptable.
How can they pass a CR that funds Biden's open border process and call that a victory for anybody but Washington insiders? That doesn't solve an ounce of the problem and actually makes the matters worse.
The Senate has a different proposal on the table to keep the government open while negotiations continue. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says he backs the Senate's proposal to avert a shutdown.
I think it makes sense for the Senate. I also think it makes sense for the country, and that's what I intend to support.
U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan says she won't recuse herself from Donald Trump's 2020 election interference case in Washington. Chutkan rejects Trump's claims. Her past comments raised doubts about whether she can be fair. Chutkan said in her written decision Wednesday she sees no reason to step aside in the case scheduled for trial in March. On Wall Street, the Dow down by 68 points. More at townhall.com.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I'm Corey, and this is my story. I was going through some financial troubles paying off my credit cards. I was paying high interest rates, and it just wasn't getting any better. And I knew I had to do something. So my mom told me about Trinity, and so I decided to call. Trinity was able to do something that I couldn't. I'm paying off my debt. I'm saving thousands, and things are really looking up. I promise you guys, you will not regret it when you call Trinity, because it was such a relief and less stress in my life, and it was the best thing I could have done for myself, because once I called Trinity, they took care of me, and I felt such a relief, a weight off my shoulders. Trinity was great to work with. They wanted to help me. I love it.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-990-6976.
I'm Corey, and I'm debt-free for keeps.
1-800-990-6976.
Senator Robert Menendez of New Jersey and his wife Nadine pleaded not guilty on Wednesday to bribery charges, marking the second time in 8 years he's stood before a federal judge accused of trading his political influence for cash and luxury items. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says Senator Menendez will address fellow Democrats tomorrow.
I was just deeply disappointed, disturbed when I read the indictment. Look, I've known Senator Menendez a very long time, and it was truly, truly upsetting. But we all know that for senators, there's a much, much higher standard. And clearly, when you read the indictment, Senator Menendez fell way, way below that standard.
There's been pressure from Senate Democrats for Menendez to resign. News and analysis at townhall.com. I'm Keith Peters.
On Point Weather is made possible by Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union on 107 The Point.
Here's tonight's forecast. Cloudy tonight with a low dipping to 61. Tomorrow will be much like today. 79 the high with mostly cloudy skies and a 20% chance of afternoon rain. For Friday, it's a mix of sun and clouds. No rain and a high of 82. The weekend looks nice with a combo of sun and clouds and highs in the low 80s. I'm Brian Leonard with your On Point local weather.
As a kid, you dreamed of being a firefighter one day. Now,
The opportunity is yours. Answer the sound of sirens. Live your dream. Become a part of a team, a family. Visit scvolunteerfire.org to find out more.
Welcome back to Sports Talk on the Sports Talk Media Network. You can reach the guys with the South Carolina Education Lottery lucky number, 888-898-2525. That's 888-898-2525. Now back to Phil, Chris, and Pat with the second hour of Sports Talk on the Sports Talk Media Network.
We are back on Sports Talk Media Network. Phil Kornblut, Chris Bergen, and Pat Daniel on this Wednesday night. Appreciate you being with us. And we got a busy hour ahead. A little bit later on, we'll head out to, shouldn't say head out. Makes it sound like it's like right across the street. We'll head over to Rome, where the Ryder Cup matches are going to begin at 1:30 in the morning Eastern Time. And MJ Ward is there in Rome to cover it all for Golf World Magazine and the other outlets that he writes for. And, of course, for us, how lucky are we to have somebody on the scene at the Ryder Cup. And considering that we blew the Solheim Cup, right? We blew the Solheim Cup.
Mm-hmm.
We need to win the Ryder Cup to even things up in the world.
Good point. I don't know if we blew it. And the Solheim Cup needs to have a complete overhaul. If you're actually going to have the best women's players in the world competing in that, you need to actually invite the Asian Tour players as well, be my opinion.
But it's supposed to be, if I'm not mistaken, like the Ryder Cup is between Europe and the United States.
But on the men's tour, the best players in the world are either from the United States or from Europe. On the women's tour, though, the best players in the world are in Asia.
Maybe a few from, other parts of the world that might argue that point. Don't we have some very good golfers from like South Korea on the PGA Tour?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I hear you.
But not to the degree that the John Rahms of the world and those type players are much more prevalent.
I agree.
But they never asked me that kind of stuff.
No, I understand why. Okay, are we ready to rock and roll with the coaches? We are ready. Okay. Speaking of Rome and Italy, we're going to get a first-hand review of what it's like over in Italy as we get to tonight's edition of Chalk Talk here on Sports Talk. And, of course, starring Chuck Reedy and Ellis Johnson. Now, last week, Coach Johnson had to carry the weight because Coach Reedy was overseas, actually in Italy at Lake Como, enjoying the sunshine and the nice weather and the beverages and the delicious food. I'm sure he had some really good spaghetti while he was in. In the meantime, Coach Ellis Johnson was back here in Columbian Winsboro dining at Rush's on a regular basis. Coach Reedy, welcome in. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, Phil. Good to be back with you.
Well, do we need to speak to you in Italian now? Do you not understand English anymore?
No. I think I understand it. No, they speak English over there too, just about everywhere. So
yeah,
okay.
Did you pick up any Italian? Any language? Did you pick up any of that?
No, I didn't try to do that. Got a lot of, like you said, good wine, good pasta, and beautiful. Lake Como is a beautiful place.
On an average day over there, when you were over there, like how many glasses of wine do you think you had on an average day?
Average, probably 6 or 8. You have to understand. You start, you start at noon. I mean, it's not like where you start at 5 o'clock.
Right.
I mean, it's pretty much an all day event.
It's like a a tailgate, a football game. It's an all day thing.
That's right.
I understand.
Yeah, you got it.
Ellis, welcome in, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
Appreciate you.
It starts at noon over here a lot of times too. That's exceptional about that with Italy.
I hear you. All right. Well, let's catch up with y'all on the games from this past weekend. Let's begin. Ellis, we'll begin with you and talk about Clemson and that loss to Florida State, a painful loss for the Tigers. Led that game all day until the very end. What do you make of Clemson now? 0-2 in the ACC, 2-2 overall, 2 losses that they themselves contributed greatly to. What do you make of them at this point?
Phil, you just about covered everything I would bring up. I mean, they've got to be pulling their hair out. They have literally beaten 2 football teams that are in the top 20, 25 arguably, and beaten them basically in most every area except they're self-destructive. And they keep doing things at critical times. Of course, that's almost a quote from Dabo. And if they don't stop, they're not talented enough this year to overcome that. But it's just a shame. I mean, nobody knew Duke would be as good as they are, but they're a good, solid team. I think they deserve to be in top 25. They'll probably hit some bumps in the road down the line, but no argument. Florida State is one of the better teams. Top 20, top 10 teams. Same thing. I mean, they beat them in most phases of the game, but they keep shooting themselves in the foot. One thing that did jump out at me, of course, Clemson's defense, I think, played well enough to win the game, but they gave up too many explosive passes to Florida State. And I think, they've got to look at that. They're too talented across the board, and I think they need to, look at ways they can eliminate explosive plays, because the rest of it, they're getting some turnovers, they're getting all shortage plays, they're doing too many good things on defense. They should win the ball game according to what their stats look like, but they give up some critical explosive plays.
Allowed 36 points off turnovers. I mean, their defense is number 8 in the country, but 55th in scoring. I guess those points, those scoop and scores, they go against your defense, so that doesn't make the defensive coaches happy. But Klubnik, I thought he really grew up against Florida State. I saw a guy that hung in the pocket, took the shots, put the ball pretty much on the money. But let's talk about that last possession of regulation and then in overtime. What did you think about how the offense handled things in those 2 situations?
Well, excuse me. I thought Klubnik, played well, like you said. I mean, he made throws. He made some plays with his feet. There's 2 critical errors that he made. The sack, and scoop and score. He's got to be aware as a quarterback. You've got to know where the unblocked guy's coming from. I mean, you can't just not be aware of where that guy is coming from and take a fumble and they turn a 14-point turnaround. Mm-hmm. And then in the overtime, and I think Dabo, he made this clear that this was a coaching mistake. You give a guy, you call a play, and a lot of times you have plays that are double calls, and where they can either, obviously he could have either handed the ball to Shipley, or if he had numbers, on the perimeter, then you throw the screen. Well, and they shouldn't have given him that option. I mean, if you don't want him to throw it out there, then don't give him that option. You call a handoff to Shipley, mm-hmm. and with 2 downs to get 1 yard, that's a critical mistake, and it's not all on him. I mean, like I said, he shouldn't. They shouldn't have given him that option unless they wanted him to take it. And then of course they obviously the blade blew up on them, on the perimeter. But no, I thought he got better. But you in any close football game between 2 good football teams, it's been said 1,000 times. There's going to be 2 or 3 plays in the game, that are going to determine who wins. And unfortunately, those plays have gone against Clemson. And if they don't get it corrected, they're going to have some down the road. They're going to have some other losses, I'm afraid.
Mm-hmm. Also, too, Chuck Reedy, Ellis Johnson with us. Chuck, going back to Clemson. I mean, you bring in a kicker who had been living in Charleston to replace your expected kicker. And, I mean, you had to know, fate being fate, the game was worked its way down to the kicker. And you play called and you handled that last series in a way where you put your kicker out there in a position to win or lose the game, probably. And we know what happened. He missed the kick. Unfair. Right. You certainly don't want to put a kicker like that in that. If he hits it, everything is fine and dandy, and nobody thinks twice about it. But he didn't.
Right.
And now you think about, why would you put your kicker, especially if a guy just joined your program, why would you put him in that situation?
Well, no, and certainly you would rather have it in Klubnik's hands or Shipley or whoever. You're right. I mean, that was it was just a very tough situation for the young man to be put in, and it's unfortunate that that they're in that situation. That they have to bring a guy in that's already on his way to New York or wherever. But it is what it is. They raved about how good the kicker was, the other guy, Gunn, but obviously they're not pleased with him. So, I don't know what they're going to do at this point.
Well, they're sticking with Waits right now. I think they're sticking with him going into this game at Syracuse on Saturday. All right, let's turn our attention to the Gamecocks and Mississippi State. Ellis and South Carolina gave up a lot of passing yards, and this was kind of a weird thing. I mean, Mississippi State, you came in wondering why they weren't throwing the ball with Will Rogers, who is a prolific passer, and they had been running the ball, but then they totally flipped and threw the ball against the Gamecocks with success, but the Gamecocks were able to outscore them. So, I guess that was the good call by their coaching staff. What did you see with the Gamecock defense, in particular the secondary, why they were having trouble with the deep ball? I mentioned earlier tonight that they completed 6 passes of about 20 yards or longer over the top of the Gamecocks.
Yeah, it looked to me, it's hard to tell sometimes on TV, but it looked to me that the majority of them were busted coverages. The kid was just too wide open, and I don't know, exactly what the schemes were. It's hard to tell with the camera angles and all that. But that's what it looked like. And I know they've got a few guys banged up and maybe don't have their oldest and experienced back there, but those things were pretty obvious. The good thing, as you said, is they did play a little bit better rush defense. And only gave up 32 yards, I think. Mm-hmm. But that, hopefully that's a good sign moving forward, and not something that was just all of some kind of funny situation happened in that one game. They beat the team that's probably at the bottom of the SEC West, and they had them at home, and they managed to get it done. But I think it's just still, I hate to say it's 4 weeks into, it's still a wait and see on what the Gamecocks are. And from a defensive standpoint, they did get a takeaway, got an intercept off the guy, but they're going to have to start making more critical plays at critical times to complement their offense. Rattler was unbelievable again statistically. The weight they put on his shoulders, and he continues to function, but that's not going to happen with at least half of the teams going down through the rest of their schedule. It's going to be more of a Georgia-type scenario. So hopefully the defense did find some answers to the run game. And these things that happen in secondary, they can obviously fix those things. The good thing is they play in Tennessee, and Tennessee is not the Tennessee they were last year. And actually, they're running the football better than they're throwing it right now.
But do you think Tennessee has dropped off? I mean, I know they lost the game at Florida, but do you think there's a significant drop-off with Tennessee with Milton at quarterback from Hooker?
I think it's a terrible inconsistency in comparison. I know he's a more talented kid, supposedly arm strength and all that. They say he can throw the ball 110 yards, but problem is the football field isn't that long. So I don't know what the hell good that does. We never did defend. We didn't ever defend that last 10 yards in the stadium or in the seats. Maybe I don't.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you just look at last game, Phil, they're playing San Antonio, who's 1-3, and a struggling group of 5, or maybe 1AA. And he was average at best. I mean, and I don't know if it's all him. I looked at their receiver names. I don't see a lot of the familiar names that were lighting people up last year. It could be a lot of things that are going into it. But they had barely over 200 yards passing last week and rushed for over 300. Now, whether it was just the way they chose to approach that game, I don't know. But he's certainly been less than spectacular. And if you saw Josh Dobbs in the NFL game Sunday, he's pretty good on that level, too. So it just says to me that the guy they had last year was not only a playmaker, but he was really a game controller and a smart guy that always went to the right place with the ball and was accurate with it, on time, et cetera. And he was the guy that made it go. And right now the quarterback is a talented kid, but he's not making the kind of decisions and getting the ball to the right people at the right time. And again, is the supporting cast what it was? It doesn't seem to be. It just seems like the quarterback really is not making the right plays.
Chuck, South Carolina offensively 37 points. As Ellis mentioned, Rattler was extremely good. They got a running game going against Mississippi State. It looked like Shane Beamer and Dowell Loggins came out with the mindset of, we're going to run the football, and we're going to run it till we can't run it, which is probably music to your ears. Did they do enough to kind of establish a little bit of a running game, especially with Mario Anderson looking like he's going to be the front guy for them in the running attack right now?
Yeah, well, obviously, they made a commitment to try to run the football, and I think Anderson, he's a running back. I mean, that's what he's done ever since he's was in high school. And he's the best option, I think, without a doubt. And as Ellis said, I mean, Rattler's playing. He's playing as good as anybody in the country right now. But Leggett is playing as good as any receiver in the country. But it's going to get a lot tougher. Ellis mentioned Mississippi State. I mean, obviously wasn't a real good football team, and it's going to get tougher. Tennessee's not as good, but still going to Knoxville, I think is going to be a real challenge for them.
Yeah, Gamecocks always. A lot of teams have trouble in Knoxville. South Carolina, of course, long-time series with Tennessee. This will be the 42nd meeting, and they've only won 3 times there in Knoxville. All right, so let's turn our attention to the breaking story of the day from Gene Sapikoff of the Post and Courier. I would imagine you guys are aware of the what appears to be the pending move of Clemson out of the ACC, probably to be announced sometime next week or sometime in October with a Board of Trustees meeting next week. Feeling is something will come from that. Chuck, Clemson leaving the ACC, did you ever think you would see that? I said earlier tonight that Dabo Swinney is living his worst nightmare. Tell me if you agree or disagree. He's having to pay players. He's having to, he's not having to, but I mean, he's being kind of pressured to attempt to recruit the transfer portal, which he's resisted. And now it would appear he's going to be leaving what's been a pretty cushy area for him in the ACC and jumping in to the Lions' den, whether it's the SEC or the Big Ten. What would you think of that, Chuck, of if Clemson ups and moves from the ACC and lands in one of these other leagues?
Well, I think obviously it's been an inevitability or an inevitable situation that they were going to at some point leave. Now, and I read the article. I just don't know. I don't know where they're going to go. If neither one of them is probably a good option for Clemson. I think you nailed it. Ellis and I both coached there. Playing in the ACC, you could usually count on 5 or 6 wins, right out of the gate. That won't be the case if you're in the SEC or even in the Big Ten for that matter.
Ellis, your thoughts?
I agree with most everything Chuck said. I actually visited with Davo the other day, and I think a lot of people have the wrong idea about his transfer portal approach. He does emphasize recruiting more, but it's a way that he sells it to the recruits. It helps him in recruiting, I think. That you come in the second year to third year you're here, that's going to be up to your position coach to develop you. He's not going to the portal and get your, you're not going to be relegated to a backup role. So it works for him. Will it continue to work? I don't know. The environment, the NCAA right now, is about to make me puke. I don't know where it's going, but if they don't quit chasing the dollar and making that single focus, it's going to really hurt college football. Not to get off on that tangent, I don't know if it'd be a good thing for Clemson or not. I'd like to know where they're going to. I mean, Florida State started all this saber rattling the other day, and they didn't have anywhere to go. Out of the financial ramifications of it, I don't think they'd make the decision unless they've got an answer in their back pocket.
Yeah.
But it just, and hell, by the time they go, it may all be shifted again. We don't know what's going to happen. So there may not be a Big Ten and a SEC. It might be some other conference form between them. I just think there's some dynamic things coming down the road. I don't think they're all good, but one day Disney will tell us what they're going to do, and we'll all have to go from there.
Yeah. Before we let you go, Chuck, who do you think's the best team in the country right now?
I would still go with Georgia.
Anybody like, the Ohio State win over Notre Dame, or maybe Oregon, the way they look?
You asked me the best. I think Georgia, but obviously Ohio State beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame, which was a big deal. Oregon beat a Colorado team that's not very good. That got a bunch of hype because they beat a bad TCU team and a bad Nebraska team. And a real bad Colorado State team, But so I don't know that Oregon is up there, and we don't know enough about Southern Cal yet.
Mm-hmm.
You have to say Texas, but you better put Texas in that mix too. I would think they were probably in the top 3 or 4. They've certainly had some good wins.
Ellis, what do you think?
Gosh, it's such a hard question. I mean, it's almost, you asked us to pick the playoffs the other day. I think we won, right? I thought I'd never say this, but I'm telling you now, those West Coast teams right now, I don't know about defensively. Oregon plays pretty damn good defense, but they are the whole conference is so much stronger. I think their victories out there mean a lot more than they used to. I tend to go with Georgia. For some reason, though, they're starting slow every game, and they're not quite as prolific on offense. But as long as they keep playing as well as they're playing, they'll certainly be in the mix. If you told me I had to pick one right now, I don't know. I think I would probably go with Michigan.
Michigan?
Yeah.
Well, I can see that. Well, Michigan, Ohio State, they'll settle things. And, of course, Penn State, you still have them kind of looming there in the Big Ten as well.
Yeah, as much as I hate to admit it, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 certainly look like they did back when I was in the 6th grade.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's a perfect time to break up the Pac-12 when it's having its best year in years, right? So, let's break it up now since everybody finally got good. Football. Absolutely. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure. Chuck, it doesn't sound like the wine, did anything to your brain or anything like that. You sound as sharp as ever. We appreciate that. And
I appreciate it. Good to be back.
Ellis, those Budweisers at 9 in the morning not affecting you too much either, so that's good to know.
I quit drinking those a long time ago.
All right, guys. We appreciate you. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, fellas.
All right. Enjoyed it, Bill.
Yes, sir. As always. We'll get that lunch next week, Ellis.
Yeah, I've got it on the calendar, Phil. I got it every day.
No, I promise next week. Next week's a promise.
Okay, I get phones in my phone, so I mean I hadn't seen it come up except on Wednesday night.
It's coming.
Whatever.
It's coming. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you, Ellis. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
We appreciate you guys. All right. Great stuff as always. Chalk Talk on Sports Talk with Chuck Reedy, Ellis Johnson. And we'll be back. We'll give you recruiting and live from Roma from the Ryder Cup.
On Point Weather is made possible by our friends at Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union on 107 The Point.
And here's tonight's forecast. Cloudy tonight with a low dipping to 61. Tomorrow will be much like today. 79 the high with mostly cloudy skies and a 20% chance of afternoon rain. For Friday, it's a mix of sun and clouds. No rain and a high of 82. The weekend looks nice with a combo of sun and clouds and highs in the low 80s. I'm Brian Leonard with your On Point local weather.
I'm State Treasurer Curtis Loftus. People often ask me, when should I start saving for college? And I always tell them, start today. September is College Savings Month, a great time to start saving for your child's education. Future Scholar makes it easy to open and manage your account online, and the plan offers options and benefits you won't find with a regular savings or investment account. So make this the month that you go to FutureScholar.com and see why it's the smart, easy way to save for college. FutureScholar.com.
With SRN News, I'm Keith Peters reporting the next Republican debate of the 2024 election season is about 90 minutes away. That debate being held at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California. The White House says the American soldier who sprinted into North Korea across the heavily fortified border between the Koreas 2 months ago has been released into U.S. custody. Private Travis King's release was secured with the help of ally Sweden and rival China. Earlier Wednesday, North Korea said it would expel Private King. The announcement has surprised some observers who expected the North to drag out these detention in the hopes of squeezing concessions from Washington at a time of high tensions between the rivals. On Wall Street, the Dow down by 68 points, the Nasdaq rose 29. More details at srnnews.com.
I sure like to brag about good local businesses. Franklin Plumbing and Drain Cleaning is a great local biz. Josh and his team stress customer service as their top priority. Franklin Plumbing and Drain Cleaning came out to my house. I had a toilet that wasn't working right, a garbage disposal that died. They came out right on time, told me everything they were going to do, and explained the price of each repair before even bringing in the tools. I knew exactly what I was getting and exactly what it would cost. Their prices are fair. Their team is courteous and professional. Plus, they did a great job fixing what needed fixing in my home. I am very careful about making any recommendations, and I'm thrilled and confident to suggest you call Franklin Plumbing and Drain Cleaning for any plumbing needs. If it's a repair or to replace something, if it's that tankless water heater that you've always wanted to give you that endless hot water and save you some money. They unclog drain and sewer lines and so much more. Online, you'll find them at franklinplumbing.sc.com or just give Josh and those great folks a phone call, 799-2222. That's 799-2222, and tell them you heard about them from here at The Point.
Hi, I'm Karen Pickard. And I'm Katie Griner. Every Tuesday at 8:30 to 9 a.m., we'll be talking about issues that concern seniors and their families.
So join us right here on The Point Radio for the Positive Points on Aging, brought to you by Oakley Village of Lexington.
Shepherd's Glass has provided commercial, residential, and auto glass installation, repair, and replacement to Columbia for over 50 years. Large retail storefronts, auto, custom shower enclosures, and mirrors for that remodeling or new construction project. Visit shepherdsglass.com to see and learn more. Now with 2 locations on Flat Springs Road in West Columbia and Chapin at 855 Chapin Road. shepherdsglass.com.
Shepherd's Glass. Shepherd's Glass. A true reflection of quality.
Hey, honey, do you remember if Dad took his meds this morning?
You know, I'm not sure.
He isn't either. Keeping up with his meds is overwhelming.
You know, True Pharmacy packages medication. They showed me a sample, and it even separates them by date and time of day.
Something like that would be really helpful for Dad and for me.
Even better, it's free, just for being their customer. True Pharmacy, 1628 Charleston Highway and 3217 Devine Street, or TrueRxSC.com.
Hey, it's Jay with the Cigar Militia, Columbia's premier cigar store.
Have you noticed the change in weather? Some people call it fall. We call it cigar smoking season. Or better yet, it's football weather. Come in and check out our humidor and do what I do and get your go-to stick or try something new. We've got an awesome staff willing to walk you through and help you find your new favorite. And besides, you're going to need some celebration cigars for when your favorite team wins the big game. The Cigar Militia, 1410 Colonial Life Boulevard.
Hi, this is Joel Lurie. I'm the host of Health Matters every Monday morning from 9 to 10 right here on 100.7 The Point. Join me as we talk about issues impacting your health and our community. It's Health Matters every Monday at 9 a.m. right here on The Point.
MJ coming up from Rome and the Ryder Cup in just a moment. We give you a quick recruiting update brought to you by Seawells. Boy, they had an Italian feast tomorrow at Seawells. That would be appropriate for our Ryder Cup report coming up from Italy. But they do have the daily luncheon buffet, and no matter what they're serving, you know it is primo. So make sure you're there tomorrow and Friday, 11 to 2, for the best buffet in the business. When MJ comes back to Columbia, we're going to take him to Seawells. Let him have a Seawells buffet luncheon. Better than anything he can get in New York. And for the best in the catering business, that is Seawells as well. 803-771-7385 is their number. Online at SeawellsCateringSC.com. Just a couple quick things. Caught up with the new USC basketball commitment last night. 6'8" Hayden Simeon from Powdersville. And he said he actually committed to the Gamecocks on Friday. And he announced it yesterday. He came in for another visit on Saturday. And he also had a major offer from Wake Forest. But going back to see South Carolina and visit with Paris and the coaching staff and how he coaches, he said, stood out to him the most. He said a lot of coaches just talk words. And he believes what Paris says is what Paris will do with him. He's considered a power forward, but he said actually he plays everywhere on the perimeter. He can go inside, plays with a lot of energy. He's very aggressive and looking forward to playing for his in-state school. At Powdersville High School as a freshman, he averaged 15 and 11. He played last year at Greenville Legacy Early College. He's gone back to Powdersville for this year. USC offered 2025 6'8" E.J. Walker of Erlanger, Kentucky. 6'2" Dale Jones of Chandler, Arizona, made his official visit to Clemson last weekend. 6'8" Micah Smith of Tyrone, Georgia, who drew some interest from Clemson, committed to James Madison. Football. One-time USC commitment defensive end Zay Hardy of East Mississippi Junior College was offered by Marshall. In 3 games this season, he has 6 tackles and 2 sacks and 2 tackles for loss. USC Clemson target 2025 defensive end C.J. May committed to Notre Dame over the weekend. He visited for the Ohio State game. Baseball 2025 right-hander Landon Fowler, 6'3", 195 of Powdersville, committed to Clemson. There you go with recruiting brought to you by Seawells. All right, one of the big sporting events in the world every 2 years, the Ryder Cup is ready to get underway here in the East, in the American East, early in the morning at 1:30. Let's head out to Rome, the site of the Ryder Cup. We welcome in our good buddy, M.J. Ward. And M.J., good evening or good morning. How are you? Welcome into the program.
Well, buona sera. That's all I can say, guys. It's nice to be here. The Ryder Cup is an extremely special event, and I know I think everybody's going to be excited to see it come this weekend. This is the first time that the matches have been played in Italy. This is only the 3rd time that it's been played in the European heartland, the other 2 coming at Valderrama and then Le Golf National in Paris a few years back. So it'll be interesting to see because much of the American squad, if not everybody, has not really played the golf course until really most recently, not just during practice rounds this week, but they had made a special trip to see it a couple weeks back. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Fortunately, in this particular Ryder Cup, the weather will not be a factor. So you're looking at sunshine for the rest of the matches. I mean, for the entire event, basically, with temperatures probably 80 or just slightly above. So, you're not going to see the kind of fickle weather that sometimes has happened in Ryder Cup play.
What should the common golf fan need to know about this course that they're going to be watching if they're up late or up early, however you want to word it? What are some of the prickly things about this golf course?
Well, Marco Simone, the main thing I can say about it, I mean, it has been beefed up. I mean, since its original opening back in 1991, the golf course is now stretched out to just about 7,200 yards. But what you won't see on television as well, because television has a tendency to flatten out things, this course is really as hilly as you would see with Augusta National, probably even more so. So there's going to be some elevation changes. The countryside, it matches in well with it, but it's been really beefed up to include the kind of bunkering and green speeds that you need to test the world's best players. But, until you see people out there playing, everything is basically speculation. But I can tell you that the Europeans have made it a point to do what they have done in the past. The home team for a Ryder Cup has control of how the golf course is set up. And like you saw at Le Golf National in Paris, you're going to see tighter landing areas, the thicker rough, so as to slow down the Americans in terms of, many of them being more power-oriented. So I think it's going to be an interesting situation of how people adjust to what goes on. But, when you're talking to world's best players, this is all about execution. It's as simple as I can put it. What will be interesting will be to see how the four rookies on each squad adjust to playing in Ryder Cup play. I mean, I can remember a few years back, I don't want to name the guy, but his caddy had to put the tee into the ground for him at the first hole. He could not put the tee into the ground. And I'm over there watching this, and this was at Hazeltine a number of years ago, and I thought it was a joke, initially. But it was no joke, and the other three players were wondering what was going on. And eventually the caddy came in from the side and had to put the tee in the ground because there's nothing like this. I mean, this is my 12th that I've been a part of, and there is nothing like the pressure of a Ryder Cup play because it's truly one for the ages. I mean, it goes in the history books. I mean, this has been going on since the 1920s. So it really is a tremendous opportunity for players to showcase themselves, but it's also an opportunity for which sometimes players take pratfalls and could have an interesting situation when you come down to the finale of what goes on Sunday.
So interesting you would say that. You would say for the player, the pressure is greater in trying to win for your country, or in the case of the Europeans, I guess their continent, the pressure is greater there than you would say you're trying to, for your own individual professional profile, trying to add a major to your biography, winning a Masters or one of the majors. You think the pressure is greater in trying to do it for your team versus the individual major championship?
I think you could probably say, look, I mean, major championships, there's only 4 of them every 2 years. And to think about it is, Phil, when you step up on the tee in any of these matches and you look across the opponent, or if it's a team match, the opponents you're playing, somebody's going to lose that match unless they tie it. But somebody could lose or somebody could win. And you don't want to be looked upon as the person who has not been able to contribute to your side. I mean, I know the players, they relish an opportunity to certainly score points, but I can tell you that they also dread the fact that they don't want to be on the hook for something that may have taken away the opportunity. I mean, what's important for this match is the American squad has not won on European soil since 1993. In the last 2 matches played on European soil, the one in Paris, the last time it was here, lost by 7 points, which is basically the equivalent of a 40-10 blowout in football. And then they lost in Scotland back in 2016 by 5 points. which is the equivalent of a 30-10 blowout in football. So, this is going to be an interesting circumstance because even though these players are known to other players, to each other, that is, that they play many of the events together, the crowd size, the noise, when you step on the first tee, it's basically the equivalent of what the waste management event is in Phoenix on the 16th hole, minus the beer cans being thrown into play. I mean, it's essentially a cauldron. You're walking into a gladiator type circumstance, and it has really magnified itself with the fan involvement. I mean, you're going to hear cheers and roars. You will probably hear the song "Ole, Ole, Ole." I mean, that thing will be played almost endlessly. I mean, so you have to be prepared for the kind of setting that's going to go on here. But the idea that the Americans, when they won at Whistling Straits, was that this was going to be some kind of juggernaut going forward. I will tell you that even though we may be slight favorites by FanDuel or the Vegas odds machine, I would say this is a dead even match between the two squads. It's going to come down to who can execute, who can putt. It's always the same thing as it always is in match play. And it'll be interesting to see how the two captains, how they decide who will play and who will sit on the sidelines for the first 2 days.
MJ Ward, our golf insider, with us here tonight as we look forward to the upcoming Ryder Cup matches over the pond, as they like to say. And MJ, I saw on Golf Channel, I guess it was yesterday, I believe, there was a reporter out there. You were talking about the course setup, and he was standing in the rough, and he put a pencil inside the rough, and you couldn't see the top of the pencil. That's how far it went into the ground, how deep the rough was. Is it equivalent to what we expect to see at a U.S. Open setup?
I mean, I think so, and I just think that, I just think that, you're talking the elite world best players here. So, I mean, it's the same golf course for everybody. The only difference is that you're going to have to be able to understand some of the vagaries of how far you want to play shots. Do you want to lay back in certain places? I mean, many of the Europeans have played under competition at Marco Simone, but the reality is match play is a very funny situation. It's all about momentum. And it's going to be very interesting. I mean, I really believe that it would serve Justin Thomas best. And I don't know what Zach Johnson's going to do. I'm guessing this. But that he would put Justin Thomas and Jordan Spieth right out of the box in the first match, just to get Justin Thomas into the flow of what's going on. It'll be interesting to see how the Europeans respond. But they have a top-heavy lineup, very solid. I mean, Rory McIlroy, Jon Rahm, Victor Hovland. But to get to your point, I mean, you have to keep the ball in play. I mean, you start getting off the fairways, then things can be real dicey. And this is where it becomes particularly so when they play the foursomes matches in the afternoon on both days. And that's where you alternate shot. One player tees off on the odd hole and the other player tees off on the even hole. God forbid if you happen to have a partner who can't hit Texas from Oklahoma off the tee shot. I mean, if that happens, then you've got some problems, because you certainly don't want to be coming out of the rough on any consistent basis, and especially if you're playing against formidable teams, which I think the USA squad has. But, on paper, everything looks like it's supposed to look like. Then you have to play the game. And we're going to see, can the Americans break this drought? Because until that happens, there is no way to really say that the United States, as we look at it now in terms of golf, has really advanced beyond winning on your own soil. I mean, that's really the test of any sports team, as we all say in all sports. Can you win on the other guy's soil? If you can't, then basically you're still limited in terms of what you can produce. And I think that's going to be a big factor going forward here, is can the U.S. get the monkey off its back so they can finally say we broke that string and now we can go on to Bethpage in 2 years' time.
MJ, Brooks Koepka is the lone live golfer that will actually be participating in the Ryder Cup this weekend. How will he be received by the Europeans? We know what kind of controversy that tour has caused here in the United States. How do they receive it over in Europe, and how will Brooks be viewed as the lone live golfer in the Ryder Cup, do you think?
I can explain Brooks. If you think back to the movies that Clint Eastwood played as the anti-hero, Brooks Koepka is the anti-hero. He walks in as the gunslinger. I don't think this guy fears anything or anyone. I understand when he comes to a press conference, he's got to put up, part of the veneer of being the tough guy, and he does that really, really well. But I will say this much. I can remember what Graham McDowell said back in 2016 when Brooks appeared for the first time, and he was at Hazeltine. And Graham McDowell, I asked him, I said, well, what one player do you really fear from the United States team, if you fear anybody? And he said, to a man, our team, it's Brooks Koepka, because they know that this guy can bring it. It'll be interesting to see what Zach Johnson does. I'm speculating that Brooks Koepka will be paired up with Colin Morikawa. It'll be sort of what Brooks will be, what DJ was when they paired up at Whistling Straits. I don't think this guy really worries about the reception that he gets. I mean, many people do not have a hug and kiss moment with Brooks Koepka, but the bottom line of it is he's got 5 major championships, and the only person who's got more that's actively playing in golf today is Phil Mickelson. So the reality is he has to step it up. He knows. I mean, every one of these guys knows that they've got to play and be ready to play when their name gets called. You just don't want to be the guy that walks out there and lays an egg wherever it is during the event that goes on. And I fully expect Brooks will be ready to play.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we look forward to it. I'm looking at the Ryder Cup website, and they give us a little Rolex watch up here in the corner. So it's 1:50 in the morning over there in Rome. So we appreciate you being up late with us. Hopefully we'll have you Thursday, Friday, rest of this week to kind of take us through the ups and downs of the round. So we look forward to it. You enjoy yourself, get some sleep, and we'll talk to you tomorrow night here and tomorrow morning there.
Thanks,
Always
MJ.
a pleasure, guys. Always a pleasure.
Oh, pleasure's all ours. And thank you so much, MJ Ward.
I love the Ryder Cup. I really do.
You love the Ryder Cup?
It's one of my favorite events, period. Not just golf. It's one of my favorite sporting events. And this goes back to when we hosted it here in South Carolina at Kiowa.
Mm-hmm.
I fell in love with it then, and it's always a lot of fun.
Yeah. Hate it that it falls during football season.
No doubt.
Play it in June.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Playing 110 degrees.
Early July. Well, think of the attention it'd get. Of course, over there, they don't care, about our football,
Mm-hmm.
Great stuff from MJ, though. Man, we appreciate that. And we'll see how it goes. By the time we come on the air tomorrow, of course, they'll be looking ahead to round, or day 2, rather. Or that'll be Friday. Be right back.
George Bryant here with Tsunami Bar Sports, and wow, Tsunami Robbie, there is now an amazing technology that you can use when you train receiving large game without having to endure pain. Please explain.
George, that is the magic combination. I have 3 simple words to define that entire concept. Stimulation, not annihilation. Regardless of your training goals, there is a level of stimulation that is optimal for your desired gains. Tsunami Bar's flexible bar technology meets these demands because the user determines the level of stimulation with the amount of speed and force they impart into the bar or training device.
Hey, this is Phil Kornbluth. The Tsunami Bar is a terrific training device, whether you're working on your fitness or your golf game. It's convenient, it's easy to use, and you won't feel beat up afterwards. Be sure to click on the digital ad on SportsTalkSC.com and get 5% off any order using promo code BBB5. Don't wait. Order today.
Your home is where your memories live. It's where you laugh and where you love. We understand the importance of the valuables under your roof, tangible and intangible alike. So no matter what's around the corner, we'll be there, offering you and your family the support that's made Farm Bureau Insurance a trusted name for nearly 70 years. You deserve more. You deserve a promise. Learn more at scfbins.com.
Call me, Alex Satterfield, at 803-749-9171 for all of your Midlands insurance needs.
It's Friday Night Live at Lakeside Lodge in Clemson, and you're invited. It's the place to be in Tiger Town the night before every Clemson football game, home or away. Lakeside has the fantastic restaurant and bar, Traditions on the Lake, plus an online TV show featuring Tiger legends Joe and Jeff Boston. And we finish with the best live bands in the upstate. Be sure to check out the Hazmatics from Atlanta on September 29th and Odyssey on October 6th. It's Friday Night Live at Lakeside Lodge in Clemson.
Hi, I'm Jim Corbett. I've been an attorney for more than 30 years. There's one thing I've learned about injury cases. It's you need the personal touch. You need the lawyer to get to know you and describe your damages. You don't want a case manager talking to an insurance company, then talking to you, and then talking to maybe to a lawyer with limited experience at the last minute to try to settle a case. I talk to you. I find out what your case is about. Jim at JimCorbettAttorney.com. Jim at JimCorbettAttorney.com for your injury cases.
You've put in the work for your education. The extra early, extra late, extra work. That's because you understand education opens doors to better pay, better opportunities, and a better you. Being educated about playing the lottery is no different. It helps you be a better player, one who knows when to play and when to take a rain check. The lottery's a game, so let's keep it fun. Learn more at sceducationlottery.com/betteryou.
South Carolinians, this message is for you, whether you or a loved one are about to receive Medicare or want to improve your current Medicare situation. Brian Spencer of Palmetto Medicare is the guy for you. This is Mike Morgan, and I've known Brian for over 20 years. He started Palmetto Medicare in 2005, and here's what I can tell you about Brian. He's not the best-looking guy in the world. He's not a poet. He's not a very good golfer. He can't sing at all, not even in the shower. All of this is true, but here's what else I can tell you about Brian Spencer. There's no one I would trust more with that all-important decision of who will handle your Medicare benefits. Palmetto Medicare is local, specific, and native to the Palmetto State. Any and all plans in South Carolina are available through Palmetto Medicare, and they offer a free annual Medicare and prescription review. So with that in mind, there's just one phone call to make, 803-960-9484, 803-960-9484. Let Brian Spencer do the one thing he is good at, helping people with all their Medicare needs.
Football season is upon us, and that means Columbia is welcoming fans from around the corner and across the country. No matter where you're from, Gamecocks love coming together for game day energy that can only be found in South Carolina's capital city. Book hotel rooms, find pre- and post-game activities, and plan your tailgate spread with local favorites from pimento cheese to barbecue at ExperienceColumbiaSC.com. We'll see you soon, and go Gamecocks!
Yeah, just to make sure I'm clear, the matches don't begin until Friday morning, our time. Yeah. So with MJ, he'll be back with us tomorrow night. Then we should have things and see how the lineups are going to look, and then he can talk more about that. Then the actual event begins Friday morning, 1:30 in the morning here, which would be 7:30 in the morning over there. Okay, so appreciate that from MJ. Let's see what else we got for you tonight as we begin to wrap things up. Dabo Swinney talked to the media a little while ago.
Before we get to Dabo, Brian Snitker has been tossed from tonight's game between the Braves and Cubs as the Braves try and wrap up home field advantage throughout the NL playoffs. There was a pitch on the inside that a Cubs player obviously ticked foul. They called it a passed ball. If you watch the replay, I mean, it's fairly obvious the ball goes straight down into the ground after it hits the bat. But when the pass ball, Snicker wasn't having anything to do with that, so he's been tossed. See how that game unfolds tonight. Dabo, though, said he's still not sure about cornerback Nate Wiggins and wide receiver Antonio Williams, their availability for this weekend. Said they're both continuing to get treatments. He hopes to have an update by tomorrow. Both players, as he listed, are day-to-day. Also, I talked a little bit about playing in the Dome and how different that is, and also said that Andrew Makuba played well in his first game back from an injury, and talked a little bit about Dino Babers. Was not asked, as best I can tell, and I didn't get a chance to listen all the way through his audio. You can check it out at SportsTalkSC.com, but was not asked about Gene Sapikoff's report today about Clemson possibly leaving the ACC.
Okie dokie. Our poll question of the week is still up for you and running, and that is South Carolina offense against Mississippi State. The Gamecocks ran it 48 times. They passed it 20 times. That's the second fewest passes for Spencer Rattler at USC. Should the Gamecocks emphasize the run at the expense of the passing game moving forward? 60% say no, should not, and 40% say they will. What do you think they'll do in Knoxville?
I think they'll try and establish the run again. I just don't know that they can try and have that kind of lopsided 40-some-odd runs and 20-some passes. I think they're going to have to be much more balanced against Tennessee.
Well, we'll talk more about that tomorrow night with our folks who'll be with us and with you, and we'll have the updated news for you as well. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Pat. Great job to everybody. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.